start the recording for us?
Just coming up.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, it is 1 o'clock. My name is Catherine Delnau. I'm the state librarian and commissioner of the Department of Libraries, and I have the honor of chairing the working group on the status of libraries in Vermont. Welcome, everyone who has returned after lunch or who is just joining us. We are on agenda item 9, and we are back now from our break. From our meal break. And I'm just trying to look here. We're not on number 9. Ignore me. We had a break, number 9, and then another break. Let me try this again. We are now on agenda item 11, community comments on library structures and organizations. And our first presenter in this section of our agenda, Laura Richardson, who is a colleague from the Washington State Library, is here to share some information about what they do in Washington. And I'm happy to turn it over to you now, Laura. And you'll have about 10 minutes to share, and then we'll do about 5 minutes of questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak. We love to talk about what we do, so this is terrific. So my name is Laura Richardson, and I work for the Institutional Library Services Group of the Washington State Library. I manage one of the 9 branch libraries located in the major prison facilities in Washington State. I'll provide more detail about the questions that we were given, but I just wanted to quickly describe the unique circumstances of the Washington State model of providing library services to the population of incarcerated individuals in state prisons. The State Library and the Department of Corrections in Washington State have a contractual agreement that locates branches of the Washington State Library inside the 9 major prison facilities. We also provide interlibrary loans for the minor facilities as well. This agreement has existed for over 50 years, and to our knowledge, no other state has this type of arrangement. State libraries, we did some research on this a couple years back during our COVID stay at home, and there are quite a few states and state libraries who the Department of Corrections and the State Library collaborate on different things when it comes to providing services in prisons. But Washington State actually locates branch libraries inside their major facilities. So, so I'm just going to go through the questions. So the first question was, who ultimately is responsible for library services in your state's correctional facilities? And according to the Washington State Administrative Code, the state librarian is responsible for providing library and information services to residents and staff of state-sponsored residential institutions. And Sarah Jones is our state librarian. Our organization's role, Institutional Library Services, we call ourselves ILS, is a program of the Washington State Library, which is a division of the Office of the Secretary of State. This program locates branches of the state library in 9 major prison facilities, 2 in psychiatric state hospitals, and 2 juvenile detention centers. And these are all across our state. The program also supplies interlibrary loan services to these facilities and the 9 minor prison facilities. Laura Sherbo is the program manager for ILS, and she's been with the program for 40 years and as the program manager for 20 of those years. Our budget, so this is for the state library portion of this because, it's a contractual agreement between the DOC and the state library. And this is for our DOC facilities only, not our hospitals or the juvenile facilities. So the total 2023 budget for the Washington State Library for the DOC portion of the program is $2,557,000. These funds come from a combination of state and federal sources, with about 35% coming from LSTA funds, Library Services and Technology Act. I'm sure you guys all know what that is, but 52% coming from the Washington State General Fund and 13% from other state special revenue funds. These funds cover library staffing and personnel management, materials for circulation, OCLC subscriptions, hardware and software used for circulation and other business functions, IT support, library-specific supplies, and other library requirements. The Washington State Department of Corrections provides the physical space and maintains the space in good working order, as well as DOC IT equipment and supports, furniture, operating and general office supplies, postage, and janitorial services. But we don't have their numbers. And question, how does the Washington State Library work with your Department of Corrections? The program is managed through an interagency agreement contract. A program manager is identified for each agency, and they meet monthly to address issues and ensure the successful operation of the libraries. Each branch librarian, in coordination with the program manager, meets on a monthly basis with a facility liaison for support and addresses issues to ensure the successful operation of the branch library. What kinds of library services are provided? The Washington State model for providing library services to state prison populations is unique, again, because it locates branches of the state library inside the major prison facilities. Through the research related to our IMLS grant project, we found that most states that have prison libraries, the libraries are staffed by DOC employees who may or may not be trained librarians or even have a background in providing library services. Each ILS branch has a certified librarian, and the DOC branches also have a library associate, which is new. We just got funding to add a second person to each branch. Our branches provide the same basic services that public libraries in Washington State provide, except for internet access. Although ILS staff work to ensure that each branch provides the same level and quality of service to patrons in each facility, each branch librarian develops its collections, programs, and information services to meet the specific needs of the facility population. One example, WCCW, the Women's Correctional Facility in our state, of course, would have a different collection and different programs than the rest of the facilities. Some of our facilities have jobs programs and some of them don't. So we might focus a little more on jobs. My facility is the facility where it's not only the receiving facility, but it's where a lot of people leave the DOC when they re-enter their communities. So we do a lot of reentry support at my branch in particular. And again, ILS branches are like the branch libraries of any library system in the state. We serve our community. Our community just happens to be incarcerated. So what is going well with regard to your support for correctional libraries? The reentry services provided by ILS branches are particularly robust. ILS has an institutional librarian who has developed our collection of reference and material resources, as well as a website that is available online to the friends and family of incarcerated individuals, and a downloaded version of the website for our patrons. Laura Sherbo, our program manager, has developed a library card program consisting of agreements with public library systems across the state, whereby library accounts are created for individuals preparing to go back to their communities. The public libraries provide a means for ILS librarians to set up accounts, and we provide physical library cards the day that the patron leaves the facility, so they can, an example I give, which is an example that we see quite frequently, is someone who may be releasing homeless, going back to their county. They get $40 in a bus ticket, and when they get off that bus, they've also got a library card, so they can go to the nearest branch library in their city or county and get help from that library. And ILS services, we service underserved and marginalized Washington State residents who are at high risk for homelessness and recidivism. Again, that relates to that story that I just told about people releasing homeless and not having a lot of resources. We want to get them in touch with their library as soon as possible. And again, the library professionals working in ILS branches believe that our library should be like any other library. We serve our community in the best way possible, and just so happens that our branches are located in prisons. Some pinch points, there's a lot of them, but the big one that I think makes our program as robust as it is as well is the tensions that exist between the state library and the DOC. Because we have different purviews and objectives. On a basic level, departments of corrections set limits on access to information, whereas libraries are committed to providing access to information for our patrons. ILS recognizes that safety and security are fundamental to corrections, and corrections understands that information and recreation can contribute to successful outcomes for incarcerated populations. Restrictions on materials is an example of this tension. The DOC sets limits on access to specific materials based on safety and security concerns, and they have policy to support this need. The state library works to ensure that access to information is as unfettered as possible. We comply with DOC policy, but because policy can be interpreted differently, our program manager sits on the review committee that makes decisions about what will ultimately be restricted. And she works very hard to ensure there's a common sense interpretation of DOC policy when it comes to restricting materials. Where do you see, or what do you see on the horizon for your organization in the next 10 years? At present, our circulation systems are offline. They're offline and just specific to the branch that they're in. So our patrons can only locate materials in that branch. And we are hoping to network our circulation system soon so patrons can request materials from any of our branches. We also hope to add limited internet access to the services we provide. So patrons can become more invested in designing their own reentry plan and resources that will best suit their needs. We would also be able to add digital literacy to the information services we provide. I think I mentioned this already. We recently added 9 library associate positions to the DOC branches, and we're hoping to add associate positions to our juvenile and hospital branches as well. And our services to our juvenile facilities in the state this is brand new. It just happened this past year. Again, this is the first time these facilities have had trained librarians providing library services. So this is very exciting for us. And then improvements in statewide structures that would help the libraries and library staff. And this response is from our state librarian, Sarah Jones. She says, the service to institutional libraries should be entirely supported with state funding. The Washington program relies heavily on LSTA funds. If state funding supported all of the positions, the materials, and operating basics, then LSTA could enhance the service with innovative programs supporting reentry, education, and skills development. The partnership with the Department of Corrections is essential, and ensuring the two entities remain in partnership status is key to the program's sustainability and success. Finally, our salaries are simply not competitive, and this is true for all positions in the state library, not just in our correctional facilities. But the ILS library positions fill this lack of competitive pay directly, as they are in remote locations with inherent challenges and isolation. Incentives and better overall compensation are needed to keep the program thriving. And I just want to add here at the end something that we are working on. We received an MLIS grant just this past year, well, it's 2022, and it's a 2-year project, and it's led by the Washington State Library, by our group, but it's in collaboration with the Department of Corrections. The project is an effort to develop strategies and tools designed to address disparities in the service standards and capacities of general services libraries located throughout the U.S. and territorial prisons. The project will bring stakeholders together to identify and discuss current policies, best practices, performance standards, and outcomes of prison library services, develop adaptable models for improving and providing services, and create an online workspace for these activities. So we recognize, we're very proud of what we do, and we're good at it, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn. So this, learn from other systems. So this project is meant to share what we do and how we do it. We are creating modules that people can adapt or adopt and develop for their own specific needs. It doesn't mean that they have to, create, the same model that we use with the partnership between the DOC and the state library. I mean, the contractual model. But we feel like, the information that we gathered over our COVID, I keep calling it a COVID break, our stay at home. There are a lot of states out there that they're barely providing, you can't even call their libraries libraries. So, we want to just do what we can to improve services throughout the U.S. But it is meant to be a collaborative effort. So we're starting it, but we hope that with the energy and investment of other states, that it grows and becomes something more than just talking about what Washington State does. So.
Well, thank you, Laura. I really appreciate that you shared with us what you're doing. Our inclusive services librarian, Karen Gravlin, has called your efforts kind of the gold standard of service to incarcerated individuals. So it's great to hear what you're doing and how you're doing it. We have just a second for questions. Does anybody have a question this morning, or this afternoon rather, for Laura? It's a lot for us to digest, and it's really helpful. If you're able to share your written responses with us, that would be really great, because then we'll be able to dive into that a little bit deeper, and that would be very helpful, because
Absolutely.
you're doing so much wonderful work there. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to move to our next commenter, who is Wendy Hisco. Wendy, thank you for joining us today, wearing your GMLC hat, I believe.
Yes.
I'll turn the camera off and get straight to you. You'll have about 10 minutes to share and then 5 minutes for questions.
Great. Thanks for inviting me. I did submit for GMLC some written testimony, and I'm just going to go over some highlights of GMLC's work for the past 15 or so years. And I just wanted to let people know, going into it, I have been in library since 1998, where I started in Massachusetts, and then I moved to Maine in 2004, where I was a manager, managed level for public libraries there, and became more involved in the state consortium there, and then moved to Vermont in 2009, where I found a bit of shock at how isolated Vermont libraries were, with very little sharing. So that's how I became involved with GMLC, after learning about the Follett system that we were using at the Brownell Library, and how unflexible it was, and how much we needed a different a system to serve our library better. And it became a much larger system by through the work of the GMLC consortium. GMLC was formed in 2008, and it was formed in directly response to the Department of Libraries not willing to contract with a downloadable audiobook service. And Stephanie Chase founded GMLC to contract with Overdrive and create a shared system. Overdrive started offering a digital download platform for libraries in 2002. So there was some impatience that there wasn't that solution being offered in Vermont. And so we, that system, Overdrive, we contracted with Overdrive in 2008 to start the Listen Up Vermont system, which is now the larger of the downloadable ebook audiobook services that is offered in the state. And in GMLC, we recognize we have more agility than the state, because we don't have as much bureaucracy as a nonprofit. So, and we also run on volunteers, so we're able to keep our costs down through that. And so that has been a big part of our success. We, Vermont really is a grassroots sort of state, with community people stepping up to manage a lot of things, and that is the case with GMLC. And we continue to offer services that the Department Library hasn't been able to offer consistently, because they've often lost funding or have limited funding or budget cuts, and GMLC has just really passed on the savings to libraries in the state. And we just try to adjust our membership fees to best serve the libraries in the state. We have over 160 libraries that are GMLC members that receive the Overdrive service, Listen Up Vermont, as well as we also offer Mango Languages, which is offered to, I think we have 19 libraries that subscribe, and then the Vocal Consortium, which is the first shared ILS in the state. And we have 62 member libraries, 62 actively using it, and it will be 66 by the end of this year. The library volunteers we have are generally professional librarians across the state that are selectors for the Listen Up system. And then we also have committees that are active in the vocal system, which is the first statewide system, as well as just we have a lot of active users. We don't want to be offering competing services with the Department of Libraries, and we really are about just affordable standard library services. There have been duplicate services Department of Libraries has offered in the past, and that seems to be something we're getting away from, which we really appreciate. Let me get down here. So the biggest system outside of Listen Up is our vocal system, which I just mentioned. And this was something that was tested at standalone libraries in 2008 prior to my arrival in Vermont. And then in 2009, when I realized that it was a solution that was being explored, I jumped on board to help launch the first statewide consortium in 2010. Brownell Library was the first library because we had the biggest database of bibliographic records. And then in 2010, the Department of Libraries launched an effort to start the Catamount Library Network, which was initially going to be using the Evergreen open source solution. Vocal uses Koha. And then at the last minute in 2013, the state decided to use Koha and use the same vendor that we have, but we have very different governing strategies where Vocal is much more customizable to the libraries, where the Catamount system that was cut from the Department of Libraries in 2015 is now, they're run by a governance group of members, but they have more of a hierarchical structure that they decide on the circles and stuff for everybody, where Vocal is much more customizable. So we also launched the delivery system in 2016. In 2011, the Department of Libraries launched an ILL task force to study interlibrary loan in the state. There was a lot of frustration how expensive interlibrary loan was, and it was often a hidden service because everything was sent through the U.S. Postal Service. And there was a report that was produced. Delivery service was something libraries really wanted, but there was a decision to study it more. And then in 2015, GMLC decided to just move ahead with our own feasibility study. And then we worked with Green Mountain Messenger and launched a statewide delivery service in 2016 that included over 100 libraries. And then in 2018, we handed it over, that delivery system, to the state, which the state continues to maintain. In Overdrive, we have over 28,000 Vermonters using the system, at least in the past year. It keeps growing year to year. There was over 600,000 checkouts in the past year. And there are pinch points there because of how expensive licensing is for libraries. So we do our best to keep the cost for libraries down because there are so many small libraries in the state. But the holds list, as things get more popular, continue to grow. And that's something that we continue to kind of figure out, how can we manage that? How can we afford that? We put about almost $200,000 a year into new content, but it does expire for the most part after 2 years because of the licensing agreements. And the Vocal system has more than 62,000 active patrons. The system has over 1.3 million items, and last year our circulation was over 1.5 million for the year. So we want to reiterate, we don't want to have competing services with the Department of Libraries. We're just looking for affordable ways to offer standard library services. We have the structure and longevity that have been able to offer stable, consistent services to libraries in this state. And GMLC volunteers really enjoy being part of a solution and help with, really enjoy the creative problem solving, and are happy to continue supporting projects and figure out if there's anything we can do to help. But we also recognize that these are often services that have been spearheaded by state libraries in other states. So I think GMLC is a critical part of the fabric of Vermont libraries. And we continue to enjoy that part of it, but we also really see a need for greater funding for the Department of Libraries so they can continue to offer services and hopefully become more of a leader in library services in our state.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate your sharing with us today. And I'm going to open it up to the working group members for questions and comments and discussion. Working group members, this is your chance to turn your cameras on and ask any questions you may have. Susan O'Connell, thanks.
Hi, thanks, Wendy. I think JMLC has done so much for the state, and so I'll start just by saying thank you. You know, it's amazing what has been accomplished by a strong group of volunteers. I wonder if JMLC has any thoughts on the possibility of a statewide library card, if that's something that has been discussed ever, and if that's something that that JMLC has any opinions on.
Certainly been discussed, and we feel like this really should be something that comes from the Department of Libraries to be able to link the different libraries across the state. We could potentially have a system. It's just hard to have a system like you even just auto. The interlibrary loan system took a really long time to get in place. That when yeah.
I don't know if I'm breaking up or you're breaking up, but I stopped being able to hear you.
Looks like Wendy's maybe frozen.
Yeah, that's like,
there she comes.
I can hear you now, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've talked about it. We would love to do something like that, but the amount of trying to get everybody on board is really something that just the trying to get everybody on board with delivery, which really truly was trying to be offered across the state, and some of the difficulties because of it's trying to, like, we are in Chittenden County, we have home card, and it's really a group of rules that everybody agrees to, and that's something that really we don't want to be in charge of. Like, if your patron comes to Essex Junction and doesn't return something, that's something that really needs to be decided at the state level how it's handled. That it's there's more funding, I think. Like, in Massachusetts, you could go anywhere. You could use your library card if you lived in Provincetown and you're in Western Mass, but there was technology systems that did let that happen without having to replicate a lot of, like, in home card, we don't have everybody on the vocal system. So anytime a new person comes, you have to add a separate record. And it's cumbersome. And trying to get that all to work together is not the easiest. So.
And I wonder as well, having worked both with Vocal and with the home card system, you probably have a lot of experience with having to find consensus among libraries that have different ideas about systems. Any words of wisdom on what works well to find that consensus?
I think really looking at national standards is the best. Like, if there's national professional standards, that is something that's really important. Like, for Vocal, we started saying, like, okay, we need 14-digit barcodes because that's the standard in the world. And so really trying to offer flexibility. But when you have 62 libraries sharing things and you have some people using 4-digit barcodes, that's going to really mess up things. So just any sort of standard that is normals, but that won't create any duplication within a database that could break the database. So important.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have just a minute left with Wendy today. Are there any last questions or comments from working group members? Okay, well, thank you so much. Oh, Jeanette?
Just a hearty thank you for everything that you and the organization do. That it's really
Thank you.
appreciated out in the hinterlands.
Oh, thanks for saying that. We really do enjoy the work that we do, and we have a great group of people that we work with. And it's just nice to know that our work is a positive for others as well.
Well, thank you, Wendy, and thanks for being for writing testimony and for being available to talk with the working group today. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to turn now to Lawrence Webster, who has been on pretty much all day. So thanks, Lawrence, for joining us. And we look forward to hearing what you have to share for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll ask questions at the 10-minute point to the
Right
15-minute point.
here.
Thank you.
And I will make every effort to stay within that, even though those of you on this call who have worked with me know that I might have excessive amounts to say on the subject of library governance. First, I want to try to share my presentation, which I may or may not be able to do. Is that working?
Yeah, it's just popped up.
It's there. Okay, excellent. And I also know a number of you probably have no idea who I am. And why would Lawrence Webster suddenly weigh in on library organization and structures? I have been a librarian since 1971, and I've worked with special libraries and academic libraries and public libraries and state libraries for a number of years. And after a long stint with the state library in Florida, I went out on my own. I wanted to be free of bureaucracy. So I have since consulted with state libraries, but also with library systems and individual public libraries. I've been working with Vermont libraries since '06 and am quite familiar with the landscape here in Vermont. So I do feel, and I also am maybe the only person I know who is really excited about library governance. I actually find it fascinating and important. So those are my creds to some extent. And I am delighted to see some of my former colleagues again, too. It's great to be here. I was also very, very happy when this working group was formed. When I first came to Vermont, like Wendy, I was amazed at the isolation of individual public libraries. I was used to, you go online, you put on a hold, the book shows up at your public library the next day. I'm also a New Yorker by birth, so I'm very familiar with the systems there. And the goodwill here was enormous, but the formal structural organization for systems in particular wasn't. Now, I have provided written testimony, but today I just want to focus really on library systems. But first, I want to point out that right now, libraries are more important than they have ever been. We are the premier institution in America who protects the values of our founding fathers. Unfettered access to information, and unfettered access to all viewpoints of information, authoritative and well-vetted information. These are all things that we do to create a happy citizenry, a well-informed citizenry that can govern itself effectively.
Lawrence, can I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I think I spoke too soon. I don't think the slides are moving. We're just seeing the background.
You're seeing that opening slide. Okay, thanks, Josh.
Oh yeah, now that seems to be doing the trick.
So it won't play, it'll just do
yeah,
okay.
I think that's it.
Okay. So anyway, I'm just ranting. We all are familiar with the issues of censorship and control of information, control of what classroom teachers can say and not say. These are popping up all over the country. Florida is kind of a whipping boy right now, but it's everywhere. And I think it's up to us to be extremely vigilant. So the point of all of this is to say that the point of a really good organizational structure for libraries is to structure ourselves in an optimum way to provide the best possible service to the most people. It's simple. We talk about this all the time, but I don't think we really unpack what that means very often because we hear it so much. And I was delighted to read in statute that the Vermont General Assembly decided this. It ties public libraries directly to democratic values. It is the policy of the state of Vermont that public libraries, that is a typo, excuse me, that public libraries are essential to the general enlightenment of citizens in a democracy, and that every citizen of the state of Vermont should have those benefits. So that libraries are important to our civic infrastructure, and every single citizen should have access. So as we're thinking about organization and structure and any revisions that we might contemplate, I think this is a key purpose. At present, there are a whole lot of statewide kind of structures in public libraries. GMLC is, I'm a huge fan, by the way. It's kind of a remarkable institution. The Department of Libraries with the Board of Libraries and Catamount and the Public Library Foundation, they're all another thing. Vermont Library Association, Vermont School Library Association, and the Vermont Council of Academic Libraries are all sort of existing organizations that pull libraries together or librarians together one way or another. Would be nice to get out of our silos and put us all in the same pot, really talk to each other. I was delighted to hear the presentation about the ecosystem. I think we could jump on that bandwagon in a hurry and reap some really good results. But let's talk about library systems. The benefits to patrons are obvious. They're choose from more materials, all kinds of formats. The service can be equalized across the system. So if you live in a small town that can't afford a really great library, you still have access to really great library service. The requesting and delivery services get more and more seamless every year in the systems that work well. And online lifelong learning and educational services that we have many of, but are provided best at a system or even statewide level. Convenient access. I lived in a very small town in upstate New York that burned to the ground, but the library was able to open 1 week later in borrowed space because it belonged to the Mid-Hudson Library System. Kelly's familiar with that particular system, and I've told this story many places before. In general, this helps strengthen community, the library community and our communities. And it ensures expert and consistent assistance by everybody. So when you walk into a public library, you know you're either going to get or be referred to a place that can really help you. The benefits to staff and trustees are enormous of a system. You've got access to bigger collections. There's more tech support and training. The integrated library system helps enable a courier, a user interface, all kinds of things like that. It is possible to consolidate some administrative tasks, bookkeeping, HR, payroll. Maybe you could have some floating staff, subs, children's services, maybe marketing help, things that individual libraries can't afford to have dedicated staff for. And the sky's the limit. You could probably think of a zillion other reasons that a system could be useful. But systems really scare people. I've been talking about library systems in Vermont for 15, 20 years. And I always get, but they'll tell us what to do. They're going to try and control our collection. They're going to give us personnel policies we don't like. But that is not necessary. That's just not true. A consolidated system, yes, you have one administrative unit, you have a bunch of branches, and lots of policy matters are decided at the administrative unit level. Hawaii is interesting as it's a state that has a single consolidated system, one administrative unit with 51 branches. But in general, consolidated systems, as Jeremy said this morning, are much more common west of the Mississippi and in the southern states. these are states that were slower to develop community libraries, so they were imposed often at the county level, for example. And our libraries started way before there was that kind of intra-communication. They're older, they developed home rule feelings. That we love our own identity, but it is true, and New York is a perfect example, and I think the other New England states, Massachusetts I know something of, have very good examples of ways to have a cooperative system that provides all the benefits without interfering with your local identity, local decisions about collections, governance, whatever. All those things that we love to protect. We like our individual identity very much. And this is, I often hear conversation about consolidation of schools and how difficult that has been. And I think our situation in libraries is quite different. And if you see cooperatives in the way that GMLC has shown the way, really, as service organizations primarily, and as organizations that help individual libraries expand services to pretty much every citizen, remember that every citizen thing. There are a lot of variations along this continuum, but I think it's well worth thinking. Do not throw out the idea of public library systems because of fear of losing local control and local identity and that special flavor that your library has. And believe me, I visited probably more than half of the 200 libraries in Vermont, and I really respect and appreciate the local flavor.
Lawrence, we have just a couple of minutes for questions now, so I'm sorry to interrupt. Working group members, do you want to come back on screen and share any questions or comments that you have?
Sorry that I can't finish because I would like to.
Well, if there are no questions, you're welcome to continue through the end of your time. I just, we have a practice of 10 minutes for
right. I
the
appreciate
presenters.
that too. It's just so, yeah, okay. Okay, just to wrap up then, and then maybe there's still a second for questions. We are the only state in the country without some kind of public library system. Systems can greatly enhance the services we provide for Vermonters. You don't have to give up the autonomy. And I also think we have very good foundational materials to build further. The Department of Libraries is increasingly participating in statewide provision of service. GMLC does great work, and there are lots of local efforts. So that will more or less wrap it up. I apologize for going long. Let's close this up.
Oh, please don't apologize. Everything you shared is great. Everybody, if you have any questions for Lawrence, please unmute, unblack out your camera. I don't know what the correct word for that is. Clearly, I'm getting loopy this far into the meeting today.
Yeah.
Susan, yes.
Well, I have a million questions, of course. I always library systems. I guess, Lawrence, what I want to know, if we are, take it as a given that we're at least interested in exploring some sort of cooperative system that would allow us to keep our local control, but benefit from some larger systems sharing. What would our next steps be? What would we do? What could, and I guess this is kind of a second question. What as a working group could we recommend in order to get us started thinking about this?
Great question. There are a lot of approaches, and I have given this so much thought for all these years. One thought I remember having way back is to think about aligning with the regional planning commissions, of which there are 11, and they're already organized and might be willing to give a baby system office space and access to a number of regional stuff. But because Vermont is so small in terms of population and geography, even though there are those mountains, I think it would be interesting to consider a statewide library system, not like Hawaii's, because that would be consolidated, but a statewide federation of public libraries, which we have the beginnings of with Catamount and with Vocal, and somehow sit down with, first of all, study what's happened in other states and what can work, and then sit down with the key players in the current efforts and design something and try it out. This might include a statewide library card. Well, it would by definition if we had a single library system. But to me, it just makes a great deal of sense. As technology changes, the pressures are different. There will be increasing electronic circulation rather than object circulation. So that's worth thinking about. Anyway, there are a number of questions, but those are my next steps. Study and get together and talk about it seriously.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. We have to move to our next presenter now, who is Barbara Bell, who's the director at Windsor Public Library. Thank you, Lawrence, for your time today and for your written testimony. And Barbara, if you are here, if you could come on screen, and we will. Actually, Barbara's maybe having trouble coming on screen because she might have had her camera turned off. Josh, can you help with that? And Lawrence, if you don't mind going off screen for the next.
I'm trying. I'm sorry. I'm a little.
I'm having trouble with Teams all day today. It's something
Okay,
is
good. I'm
funky.
glad I'm
They've
not
updated it, I think.
I am going
Josh?
to. Yeah.
Yeah, so Barbara's all set, and just to the left, 3 buttons to the left of the leave button on the upper right is your camera on and off.
Okay, Barbara, we'll get started with your testimony now. You'll, if you could share till about 1:55, and then we'll have time for Q&A.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ball. I'm from the Windsor Public Library. And Lawrence Webster, I'm a huge fan. I was on the board in Springfield when you led us through our strategic plan, so thank you for that. Gosh, in Windsor, we have a really supportive community and a decently funded library. I say decently, not wonderfully funded because we can't afford benefits for our staff. It's sort of interesting. I just got back from like a bicycle road trip in Vermont, and I visited 2 other libraries, both very loved. One, Norwich Public Library, hugely funded, wonderful. And the other one was Versailles Public Library, which no funding whatsoever. Also loved, only open 1 morning a week. But yeah, we are a bunch of silos. I wonder, would it be possible, benefits? What Lawrence was talking about as far as being a system, would it be possible to have benefits? Is there a way that we could, all buy in so we could actually have health benefits? We so appreciate VitLib and all the trainings and connections. I remember during the early days of the pandemic, the sharing sessions with VitLib with Jason Broughton were it was so comforting and reassuring, okay, we're not alone. There's somebody else out here for us. The librarian certification is a great thing since so many Vermont librarians don't have the degree. Pooling of resources is a huge help. The courier program is amazing. GMLC and VitLib with the Palace Project, we wouldn't be able to afford ebooks, audiobooks without this consolidation of resources. The courier program. Technology is so frustrating. Being a library, we have 1.75 FTE staff. So we are the technology department, and sometimes what if there was a way that we could consolidate, even just a number to call? It's very useful, having the listserv, and putting questions out. And sometimes, it's wonderful to have that connection with other libraries and to get great, support and feedback. But for technology, especially, what if there was a technology person that we could just say, hello, what do I do about blah, blah, and actually, be able to get some text, some support. That would be incredible. Let's see what else. I'm involved in VLA, which is great. it's a great way to connect. It's a great way. The conference is a wonderful way to, share knowledge and share connections. And it was especially wonderful this past year that it was shared in with VISLA, so that we had a joint conference, so we could actually kind of meet these other people from from the school libraries, and that was really great. But it is weird that we have 3 Vermont. We have VLA, we have VISLA, we have VCAL. It seems a bit redundant. And being involved with VLA, it's totally volunteer-run organization, which is so great. But it's also, sometimes it seems like it's so hard to get things done. And I think about my board of directors, at my library, which is all volunteer, and they get a lot done. But one of the reasons they get a lot done maybe is that I'm a paid person who can kind of do some background grunt stuff, and I'm like, man, if ELA had some kind of a paid magic fairy person who would just do things that would get things done, like that, the stuff that takes up a lot of time. That anything else? Yeah, I mean, just the thoughts. I lived in California for a while. I lived in Massachusetts, and they had different library systems, especially in California. I noticed, and this was rural California, so maybe it's probably different in the cities. But yes, there was a library, a county system. Did that library seem as loved as our libraries did here? Maybe not. But maybe it's just because I had an outsider perspective, and I wasn't even working in libraries at that point. So maybe I'm biased. But thank you for these discussions. I think that's about all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm going to open it up to the working group members to ask follow-up questions. Working group members, don't be shy. Come on screen. Share your comments.
Hi, folks, just hopping in. We're getting a little background noise here, so if your mic is on, please be aware of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
I think someone muted everyone. It wasn't me, I promise.
Okay, well, maybe there are no questions. I guess we will probably be able to. Let's see if our next presenters here is Katie Buckley here from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
I don't think I've seen her.
I don't think I see her yet. Well, because we're a little bit early for her too. Let's see, I think, let's see what we should do. Why don't I just take a second to share, to kind of review that there is a fair amount of other testimony today, and I really would like to encourage folks to read it. And while you're off camera right now, why don't you head over to the working group testimony page? Maybe one of the department staff can put the link to that in the chat, because we have testimony from Abigail Adams, the director at Platt Memorial Library in Shoreham. We have testimony from Charles Dabritz of Vermont School Library Association, which we heard a summary of this morning. Bryn Geffert provided testimony on behalf of the Vermont Library Association. Patty Genadio of Jeffersonville, Vermont, provided written testimony for us. Almi Landauer from South Burlington Public Library provided testimony. Star Latronica provided testimony on behalf of the Catamount Library Record. And Randall Smathers, the director of the Rutland Free Library, provided written testimony as well. Since we want to be able to discuss those in our working group discussion, I'd like the working group members now to take a brief moment, unless Kelly McCagg wants to, on behalf of VLA, say anything, because we haven't heard from VLA today directly. Kelly, I don't mean to totally stick you on the spot, but I just realized that you might have a quick something to say based on the responses that Bryn shared, because I know that you were likely involved in drafting those too. Kelly's not going to be put on the spot. It's good. That's fine. So we'll, Katie, we're just taking a few minutes before you get started to have the working group just really quickly review some documents. But we will be with you shortly. Okay, So I know that Katie Buckley is here today joining us. And Katie is with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Katie, I just want to welcome you to the working group. You've come at an unusual moment where somehow we got ahead of schedule, and then we were just taking a minute to catch up on some of the rich testimony that we had received. We got a lot of written testimony in response to some questions that I sent out to various stakeholder groups in the state.
Yeah.
And now we are back on schedule, and you are our 2:00 guest. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And thanks for the work you do supporting public library directors and trustees throughout the state, particularly those who are in municipal public libraries, but not exclusively those who are in municipal public libraries. I know that you also talk with incorporated public library directors and trustees at times about relationships with their municipalities. And so we're happy to have you here today with us. Our format is typically that you'll present for about 10 minutes, and then we'll ask questions for 5 minutes. So we'll turn it over to you for the next 10 minutes, and then we'll ask questions. I'll come back on when your time presenting is drawing to a close.
Sure, and I'm going to speak to those questions that you posed to us as well. So that's what I'll be covering today in my presentation. And it's written, so I'll furnish it to the group to have on file as a record of the meeting after I complete today. So everything I say, you will also have in writing. So thank you very much for inviting us to Vermont League of Cities and Towns to participate today. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the working group and hope that the information that I share. I am Katie Buckley. Excuse me, I am the director of the Federal Funding Assistance Program for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And just to give you a little bit about my role, I was originally hired to help Vermont's 277 eligible ARPA recipients accept their local ARPA funding, municipalities across the state. And as we've moved through that and the windfall of other federal funding that has come through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the need for municipalities to have access to additional federal funding and have resources and technical assistance to do that was critical. So our ARPA program quickly shifted and pivoted into the Federal Funding Assistance Program. And so I am speaking to you today in that role. And if there are broader questions that arise today, or even after I'm done and throughout your working group process that are relative to the league outside of my scope, I encourage you to reach back out to us and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. So just to sort of hit on the questions that were sent to us, what makes up our membership? We are a membership organization, so we have 3 membership levels. Our full membership, or all 247 organized Vermont cities and towns, are eligible for a full municipal membership. The membership allows voting privileges and input on policy development and adoption, as well as access to the league services. We also have an associate membership, which is available to Vermont's villages, counties, housing authorities, solid waste districts, fire districts, regional planning agencies, communication union districts, and other political subdivisions of the state. Associate members are entitled to the same services provided to full members, except they don't have voting privileges at our annual meeting. We also offer a partner membership, which is available to businesses, for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And this membership is part of our Business Alliance program and is more of a sponsorship level and doesn't really access the programs that we offer or have any voting privileges. And so what is the role of our organization? We are a nonpartisan organization that was founded in 1967 with the mission of strengthening and serving local government. We are member-owned by our municipal governments. 13-member board of directors is elected to represent the general membership and govern the organization. The board members must serve either as a select person, a mayor, a manager, or a clerk in a member municipality, and all VLCT member officials are welcome to attend our board meetings. We have an executive director appointed by the board that manages the league's day-to-day operations in assisting our membership. VLCT provides a range of support services and assistance, such as educational workshops, consulting advice for municipal officials so that they can deliver excellent service to their residents, support for legislation that strengthens local government, comprehensive insurance coverage for municipalities, Municipal Assistance Center for consultation on a wide range of municipal topics. The League has a contractual arrangement in place with its sister organizations, the VLCT Property and Casualty Intermunicipal Fund, commonly known as PASSIVE and most known as just PASSIVE, and the VLCT Employment Resource and Benefits Trust, which is VERB. PASSIVE provides property casualty and workers' compensation insurance to 304 municipalities in Vermont, and VERB provides unemployment insurance to 210 municipalities in Vermont. We do have some resources if you wanted to learn more about the League on our website. We have a member guide that helps members understand all the benefits available to them. It covers far more than what I'm telling you today. And we also have a very short annual report, which will give you our financial landscape. That's also available on the website. And as I said, links are included in my written comments today. So what is the cost structure for our membership? As a member organization, VLCT charges dues to its membership. Full members are charged a flat fee plus a cost per capita. So for example, VLCT's dues in 2023 for a town of 2,500 people would be $4,245. Associate members pay a flat fee, different than the flat fee for the full membership, and the flat fee for fiscal year 2023 is $997.50. Partner membership dues are tiered and are depending upon which level of partner organization they want to participate at. What support service does your organization provide to members, libraries, to the Vermont public? VLCT provides support and services programs to its full members, full and associate memberships. It doesn't serve the private sector, for-profit or nonprofit, nor the Vermont public. Since municipalities are full members, municipal libraries are eligible to use VLCT services, which range from education and trainings to insurance coverage, human resource issues, advocacy, all of the things that I listed above, legal inquiries, my work. More information and details about our program are also on our website. What is going well with regard to your support for libraries? As I said, my comments today are primarily from my role in the Federal Funding Assistance Program. So VLCT received funding through the state of Vermont to assist Vermont municipalities in accepting, administering, and expending the more than $200 million of local ARPA funds, as well as access the $1 trillion of other federal funding that's flowing at this moment. The funding has allowed VLCT to broaden its scope of its traditional support and services to municipalities to help them advance local initiatives, most of which are capital projects. It stood up the Federal Funding Assistance Program and hired me and my colleague, Bonnie Waninger, and we both have expertise in working with and for municipalities and carrying out local projects with complex capital stacks involving multiple federal programs and financing tools. Our program, Federal Funding Assistance, I'm just going to use FFA. It's a lot shorter and easier on the tongue. So assists all VLCT members, including municipal libraries. So one of the most valuable services that we offer is called Consults on Call. And this allows members to self-book a 30-minute appointment with our FFA staff and discuss their local project or initiative, whether their project's just in the idea phase, has started to gain momentum, has stalled completely, or member municipality just needs help prioritizing projects before getting started. The Consult on Call service can provide useful information, connects resources, funding recommendations, suggested action steps. We're seeing growing awareness to this service with municipalities asking about library improvement projects, especially with all of the funding that is both available through the Vermont Department of Libraries that's forthcoming, but also through other state agencies that could help advance a library capital project. What are some of the pinch points with regard to your support for libraries? Our program staff assist municipalities throughout Vermont with their capital projects. Libraries among them. As I mentioned, we work with local officials to try and strengthen their project and help them access funds and be more competitive with that grant funding. For a library project, the ones that we have worked with first and foremost, and the most important question for us staff to answer is who owns the building? And most often the answers are, we are not sure, or I think we do. And it's posed as a question, not a solid statement. And so clarity of ownership is really critical to nail down relative to the diverse funding sources that are out there, and really needed to advance a development project. And we would like to work on resolving these issues around ownership, authority, responsibility, accountability, and making that crystal clear is really critical to the success of these projects advancing. And so this can only be done through strong collaboration and a sense of partnership between the legislative bodies and the library trustees that includes effective communication, coordination, documentation. And so handshake or anecdotal agreements really need to cease at this moment and be replaced by written and recorded agreements around really real estate for the library. If libraries could worry less about the real estate they occupy, it would allow them to focus on their purpose, which is to serve the public. VLCT welcomes the opportunity to create a suite of specific resources to help resolve the library real estate issues and advance library capital projects, but lacks the staff capacity to dedicate to this niche of municipal government at this time. What do you see on the horizon for your organization for the next 10 years? Well, in 2021, VLCT hired a dynamic new executive director, Ted Brady. I don't know who on the call knows Ted, but if you know he's a big dynamic guy. He's the former deputy secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. He was the state director for Vermont and New Hampshire for USDA and longtime staff member of Senator Patrick Leahy. He brings fresh, different perspective to VLCT. And upon his arrival, he and his leadership team quickly created a bold 5-year strategic plan. I will link to our summary of our strategic plan in my comments. And its 4 cornerstone goals are to grow a sustainable and relevant member-focused organization, strengthen the capacity of local government, develop and attract talent to local government, and champion inclusive and resilient communities. And so implementation of our strategic plan brings changes to VLCT to help its member municipalities govern in the 21st century. Among them is building and growing partnerships with organizations that support local government to broaden the reach and impact of VLCT's work. This can be seen to date through our strengthened relationships and collaboration with Vermont's 11 regional planning commissions, 12 regional development corps, the state agencies. We work with the Agency of Natural Resources, Agency of Administration, Agency of Transportation, Buildings and General Services, Department of Housing and Community Development, Vermont Community Broadband, just to name a few thus far in the last 2 years and beyond, as well as other partner organizations throughout the state and statewide organizations. What improvements is, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. We need to move to the question portion because
you got it. Yep.
I'm sorry.
No,
I hope
not
that
at all.
you'll share your written comments with us for the testimony page.
Comments. You bet.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm so sorry. We just have a certain format and it's such a tight
fast,
schedule.
But not fast enough, right?
So Jeanette Baer has a hand up. Let's go to Jeanette.
Hi, Katie, you work for a wonderful organization that over my many years, I have called and taken advantage of advice and answers to questions many times until very recently when I called and I was told that the system had changed and unless my name was on a list, nobody could talk to me.
When was that call made?
A couple weeks ago. What's up?
So we, this is a little outside the scope, but we did a website update and we implemented association management system. And so what, if you don't mind me asking, what is your role? If you're not a municipal official, our site is now locked down.
Right. I'm a municipal library director.
Then you should have access. If you are a municipal library director, did you explain that is your role?
I did. And they said, unless my name was on a list as an individual, not as a position, nobody would talk to me.
Yeah, can I interrupt for just a second? Because this seems like something you two could resolve offline
Totally. I was
versus
gonna say, send me an
using
email.
Katie's valuable time with the work. We have just a tiny amount of time with her. And I imagine that other folks may have some questions for Katie
Sure.
pertinent to the working
I'm
group.
gonna put my email address in the chat. You can email me directly and I'll help
Thanks,
you resolve
Katie.
that.
I was just
Okay.
hoping other people weren't running into this new policy.
Yeah,
We'll get them through. Don't worry.
okay. We have just 1 minute left for questions with Katie. It sounds like a TV show. Questions with Katie.
Thanks, Commissioner.
I'm wondering, are there any remaining questions? One thing that comes to mind for me is we have these two types of public libraries, the incorporated public libraries and the municipal public libraries. And as you've noticed, we've run into all of these different challenges. And I'm going to have our team share with you a PowerPoint that I delivered today on statute, because I think it's something that we could potentially share to explain some of the distinctions and where to look. And
I have it's on your website.
It is.
I saw it. Yep.
You saw-
Your
okay.
staff can get a break from it. I already have
Wonderful,
access.
yeah.
I went to the materials for the meeting today. If that's the presentation you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that might be helpful to some folks, but we know, as you said, that around the building ownership, there are often these questions. And I think something that has come up even today, in earlier testimony, is really the question of, the municipal libraries seem to have access to a lot of resources and benefits, and the incorporated don't, but they serve the same function in a municipality. And I'm just curious, do you see any way to resolve that short of all of the incorporated libraries becoming, like, switching over to becoming municipal libraries? Are there any ideas that you all have ever had on that front?
I'm sort of new to the topic.
Yeah.
But it's the type of question that I love the most, right? Because it's a tough problem that needs a creative solution. And I think that's how you advance a lot of work in local government, is you need creative solutions when you have limited resources. So if I'm happy to brainstorm through that problem with anybody who wants to brainstorm through that problem, because it's really it's not less about library operations and what they do, programming services, all that great stuff, and really resolving the real estate issue. Like, real estate is such an anchor around most organizations' necks, and libraries are no different than that. So if the conversation will continue, I'd welcome being part of it.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for your time today. We appreciate you being with us, and I'm sorry that the time is so limited. And
it's okay.
Don't worry, we'll reach out.
I'm not going anywhere
continue to be in
anytime
touch.
soon, I hope. And so, yeah,
Excellent.
if any issues arise or questions arise, if I can't answer them, I'll certainly find you the person at VLCT who can, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you for the opportunity today. I appreciate your time and work.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now moving into agenda item 12, which is the working group discussion on today's topic. This agenda item will go until 3 o'clock when we adjourn. So working group members, please do come back on camera, because it feels funny talking to a sea of nobody. Jeanette, you're always there for me. Thank you. I want to make a really exciting announcement. Something has happened. You've probably been wondering what the heck's going on with that staffing and salaries survey. I can give you an update. It's very thrilling. The Department of Libraries this week finally has a signed contract with a survey consultant. You all asked, and I think we've delivered, because you asked for survey consultants who knew Vermont and New Vermont's libraries. The consultants that have been selected through our state bidding process, it's a company called Constructive Disruption. Some of you might recognize the two people who are this company, because they are former Vermont Library directors, Judah Hamer and Stephanie Chase, who some of you may know from when they were working in libraries in Vermont. So that's great news, I think. And I met with Judah yesterday and we worked on some minor tweaks to the working group's questions so that they can be loaded into the survey portal soon. And then we can have that survey go live. Just a bookkeeping or not bookkeeping, just like an update on our upcoming meetings, I guess. Instead of having the July meeting with the survey consultants, because we're a little bit behind schedule, I've made the executive decision as the chair to flip-flop the two topics. So we're doing safety in July and we're doing the August 25th special meeting on the day that we all determined we could do with the results of the staffing and salary survey topic. Does that sound cool to people? All it takes for me to change it is just revising the website. But I thought that probably would make sense given that it took a little bit longer to get the bids and to go through the contracting process. So we did use the state simplified bid process and we did have competitive bids and that is who we went with. So that is good. There's one other thing I just want to mention before we move into the open general discussion, or as we're moving into it. Just, I wanted to share that in my career, which is now so long that I age myself every time I talk about it, having started as a librarian in 1999, and I've worked in a number of I've worked in 2 other states, both of them with county systems and both of them with cooperatives, and both of them with consortia. So I've worked here in the state library observing all of these things. And now I think I've visited over 60 libraries, which isn't bad for 1 year on the job. My impression is that there are different roles for state libraries, and distinct roles for state libraries, library systems, consortia, and that many states have multiple of these things. We certainly did in New Jersey, and that they're not supposed to be something that's competing with each other. If the ecosystem is working well, to the ALA person's point this morning, this isn't it's not like a competition. We all do this together. It takes all of us. And it's also, I've just got to say, as the department head here, it's not just my small team's job to fix every problem. So as we enter into this conversation, I really encourage the working group to think about everybody's role and not just create a laundry list of that which you would like the department to do, because I think we're going to run into some strange issues with that and that we might not have the best solution. And I mentioned that we have these new consultants. And yesterday I was talking with Judah, who actually was one of the founders of GMLC, I believe. And I know Judah since I was in New Jersey. We were baby librarians together in teen services. And he worked at Buckles, a library consortium, and I worked in Somerset County Library System. And we were just talking about what is that? What is the library environment? And what are these different roles? And he really just put it in perspective for me that sometimes when you start something, you start it because the state library, people want it, but maybe the state library doesn't have the right tools or can't move quickly enough and can't go in that direction. And I do want to share, sometimes I think we've forgotten some of the history, because when people start talking about the Courier, for example, well, I'm looking at a document here that has both GMLC and the Department of Libraries letterhead from October 2015. The Department of Libraries has been involved with the Courier since the beginning. And I think I need to just get that on the record, because I've heard a lot about great work that people have done, and I acknowledge that great work. But the Department of Libraries has been involved with this since the beginning, and we are doing it now, and we're happy to partner with groups. And I can't speak to the past experiences. I wasn't here, but I do, if we need to find documents, one thing we've got here at the Department of Libraries in spades are some old files. So I'm happy to share this in the chat so you all can see it, because it's clear what the relationships were, and the department's been giving out grants to support this. So we were partnering. Maybe, another organization had the contract and we also were supporting it. So I just to like honor the work that the department has done in the past. I just do want to say that. And sometimes if we have questions about the past, let's ask the questions and we can talk about our memories, but it does feel a little funny sometimes. It's felt a little funny for me sometimes today. So I'm just going to put that out there. And I will do my very best to come to this with like an open heart and to hear everybody's perspective and to facilitate the conversation of the group. And I'm going to step back a little bit now that I've said my piece. Susan.
Oh, I think you might be muted, Susan.
I'm still just trying to remember why I raised my hand. It was a while ago. So I apologize. I don't remember. Oh, actually, no, I do. It was just a housekeeping question. If we're meeting in August about the salary survey, that means that we're expecting between May and August to put the salary survey out and have it completed.
Yes.
Excellent. That's
yeah.
fantastic.
You know what, Susan, I kind of buried the lead on that. I think we might even see it out in the end of June, early July.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I may need some of you to help getting the non-responders to become responders.
We can
over
make
the
that
summer.
happen or try to.
Yeah. And I know that some of you are really persuasive. And Susan, I'm continually singing your praises as somebody who gets things done. So I'm sure that if anybody can get some of these non-responders to respond, it could be you. And we'll need help from VLA getting the word out about this to our public library directors too. We heard a lot today. So who took some notes on some of the things that we could make recommendations about? I'm going to look back through my notes. There were some interesting remarks around some of the library history, the impacts. Oh, good, Meg, jump in, help me.
Yeah, Kathy, I mean, I'm kind of focusing, and what I'm struck by is this, I like this concept of an ecosystem and the points that you raised about not being in competition. We're a small state with 200 plus public librarians, never mind how many school librarians, like libraries plus the academic libraries. I'd love a whole number. That would be interesting to find out exactly how many libraries are in the state and how much that equals per capita. And then that's an interesting figure. But that it begets the point that we have to share our resources. We have to figure out ways to share licensing agreements, database access, the fees, the costs. Listen Up is really popular, and yet there's a long waiting lists. School libraries use Sora, for example. But again, it's not equitable across all public school children. It depends on a school district's library budget. And then again, the decision of the local librarian, whether students in that district have access, right? They could get it through Listen Up through their local library, possibly. Sora doesn't have the wait times. This idea of a statewide library card, if not like a regional or county card, some sort of a statewide card, seems like that's something we should pursue to keep in step with what other states are doing. I think more communication around the resources, for example, like at the University of Vermont and our state college systems, having access to those resources as taxpayers and students. And I think the other thing that just gets me is I was looking at the written testimony submitted by Randall Smathers from the Rutland Free Library. And he refers to a concept of a well-designed hub and spoke system, and which goes back to needing brick and mortar buildings to house, collections of books. And it just made me think of, we're going back to this. We had regional libraries at one point who were those hubs and for regions of the state. And they've all gone away, and I don't know if we still own the buildings. There certainly would need a lot of work and renovation to get them up to code, right? But now we're going back to needing these physical hubs if we're going to be sharing resources. And so looking at some alternative models, maybe it's at the college systems. I mean, I'm not sure, but that's obviously something to look at. But I think to your point, you know, we really, you said it, Kathy, you know, our system should not be in competition. And sometimes it feels like we are, even like, you know, so whether it's getting speakers to come to Vermont, whether it's conferences, resources, professional development, there's so many ways that we could overlap and become stronger.
Well said. Denise.
I think I would just agree. I would like us to explore different types of public library systems. They don't have to, I mean, they can certainly be statewide, but you could also do regional. I've lived in states where we had regional privileges, which was incredibly convenient, and certainly as a patron allowed me and I was encouraged to go to other libraries outside of my town. I don't do that here at all. So I think there are some advantages to patrons, in addition to just the accessibility of materials that you have if you are able to go to more than one library conveniently and either check out or use materials. So I would like us to explore that. But I also recognize I'm new to the state, and so I'm sure there are a lot of feelings that run deep about that, and I don't want to ignore that or dismiss that either. My impression when I lived in Connecticut was that all the public libraries all had quite a bit of autonomy and agency, but I didn't work in them, so I can't say that for sure.
I found Abigail Adams' testimony, the written testimony that she submitted, interesting around the reciprocal borrowing agreements. And I loved that it was done by the boards, that this wasn't just dependent on these two directors get along, that it was a formal agreement that they decided, and probably a meeting that people could attend, that they had a meeting and they said, we're doing this. We're both of these boards are doing this thing. Because that really codifies that relationship. I've visited some other libraries that have great things going on in the Mad River Valley. The libraries are doing such a good job of sharing resources, and they try to be open on different days so that the community can kind of go to one of these three libraries. But and they work together on publicity. So like, these are the programs the three of us are doing, and they even like divide up, well, we're really good with STEM programs and you're really good with craft programs. This is all like one of my first library visits last year, and I hope I got that all right, Mad River Libraries. But they hadn't really at the time gone that step of like getting that full board support for it. So this idea of the reciprocal borrowing agreements for complete sharing of resources like that is really, really nice. Because usually with programs, we all go wherever the heck we want to go. But with the collections, we're kind of locked out of certain libraries, right?
It might be worth exploring, you know, at a conference or something, you know, just an exploration of the topic or the concept for trustees and board members. You know, for school districts, for example, you know, there was a movement to consolidate with incentives offered. So the sooner you consolidated, the more incentives you got. And if you waited, you still had to consolidate, but got no incentives, with the idea of being, you know, we did it with our schools. Let me just say, we had all these separate school districts, and there's been a big push from top down to consolidate schools. So for better or for worse, but certainly I would, in the interest of saving money and sharing resources and providing greater equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something we didn't hear about today, but I think we've heard about in another meeting, and I know I'm aware of from a library visit to the Ilsley Library. There are libraries that have like smaller libraries that work with a larger library. So I'm right now forgetting the name of the smaller library that contracts with Ilsley for administrative support. So we do on a limited scale also have that type of a model in the state. So that's something to think about too.
And having some sort of resources in terms of how to create that setup would be really helpful. I know when we first partnered with Albany and then with the Simpson Library in East Craftsbury, it started off as a very informal, let's do this thing. And we eventually created our own memorandum of understanding. But boy, if we could pull together whatever memorandums or other organizational structures already exist to look at, that would have given us, months worth of lead time in terms of jumping ahead to it. And I think other libraries that might be looking at doing something small like that could help them jump a little bit further and do a little bit better right off the bat.
Yeah, Susan, Joy and Kevin are saying Sarah Partridge Library in East Middlebury is the one with that, where I'm not exactly sure. I think that they contract. So that might be a good one to, if you are able to reach out to Dana Hart and ask for whatever documents that they're willing to share. It also might be good to see the reciprocal borrowing agreement from Shoreham. It sounds like there's a lot going on in that little Addison County corner of the world, right?
But I think if we could collect those together, so that they were more readily available, we have that in place at this point. And I think what we did was basic, but really quite good. But the next group that wants to do it should have easy access to what we've created here and what Sarah Partridge has done in all the other places.
Right. I was kind of hoping that as the structures and organizations person, that you might put out a call for them and then just gather them for the working group. Can you do that, do you think?
Would we want them for the working group? Or, I mean, I could certainly do that for the working group, yes. And also, if we did that, could we house them on the Department of Libraries website?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Then that's a double yes.
That's a double yes. Then great. Sorry, I'm just feeling sort of crushed and I'm about to leave on vacation on Monday and I don't want to forget to do it. And it sounds like you may have your finger on the pulse of it more than I do as well. Anybody else who knows of any of these and wants to do us the solid of grabbing them. And the reason it would be good to share them with Susan is, and me and Gina, don't forget Gina the Hammer Rubin. If you share them with Gina, then she can save them in a file so that we can put them someplace together and then get them on the website. Yeah, I feel like there may be more of this out there than we know about.
For sure.
And maybe even some of the consultants know about these things, like Joy with this, with the rural libraries groups. There may be more of these in smaller communities that are doing 2 days this library, 2 days that library. I feel like there's a lot that goes on with planning, just something like a story time. And when your building's open, that there are these informal agreements, but anybody who's got a documented one, and Joy and Kevin may have some ideas about that too. I need to say, I'm still interested in this, probably because my head's been in the statutes all week, but I'm still interested in clarifying who hires and supervises municipal library directors. That shouldn't be that hard to clarify that in statute, should it?
Are you saying that we should understand the statute better, or we should change the statute? Because I don't think we can do that.
We are supposed to be able to recommend to the legislature that they change the statute. That's one of our things.
Yeah.
I think that we should recommend that they clarify it, and that the best way to make a recommendation is to hand them something and say, this is the recommendation.
Got it.
Which, I mean, to me, it's like everybody's asking the question. It keeps coming up, and if it's already been decided in case law, and then how does that work if there's the town charter and like whatever, like where is all of this written down clearly for us? I'm not sure.
So we're recommending that the statute be clarified, for example, like whatever it is that we give them.
Yeah, so, I mean, if it's the library board, I mean, even if it's something like either the municipality or the library board may supervise the director, even that is fine. And then they make the decision locally and that's, they write it down someplace. But like right now, it's ambiguous. It also seems like even with like who hires the rest of the staff, like in the state librarian roles and duties, it's really clear I hire the rest of the staff. But like I'm guessing there are some libraries out there where the board is hiring everybody and the director's just getting whoever the board gives them.
All of that's listed in our bylaws.
It is?
Specifically what the director's responsibilities are, what the board's responsibilities are. It goes through like the specific officers, what their responsibilities are. So
you've got good bylaws.
I don't know if I would say good, but it includes at least those.
Getting back to,
oh, Susan.
Getting back to the recommendations around statewide library cards, regional hub and spokes or regional systems. I'm not sure what my recommendation is, but I think an important piece to think about is education, probably mostly to library directors and possibly board members as well, on the difference between consolidated and cooperative systems. And I say that because I know I came into it thinking that that would be a terrible idea, that no one should ever take away my ability to make the decisions for my community, period. And I've moved a long ways from that, basically because of the education that I've gotten about the differences between a consolidated system where I wouldn't have that autonomy and a cooperative system where I would have that autonomy. I think that any sort of work or recommendation that was done around that should include education.
Would it be appropriate for the working group to recommend like a group to investigate models of cooperative public library systems? I mean, we can't, within the time frame we have, actually make a real specific recommendation for what would work within the state, but would it make sense for us to recommend some sort of investigatory body to really look into that, and with funding available for them?
I think so. So we'd be recommending a study on what's happening and working in other states.
We would be recommending another working group.
I'm going to remind everybody that when we recommend things like a working group, it's recommending a public body with a full process like this, which we have noticed a lot of times is a little bit cumbersome.
Could we recommend hiring a consultant, or what about like a graduate school MLS student who could get credit for doing this kind of work? I don't know.
Yeah. Why don't I try to put out some feelers about what types of groups there are that can do these things? There was a study about, I mean, there have been studies that have not been done by a working group, but that have been state studies, like legislative studies. We could recommend a legislative study. Like there was one prepared by the Joint Fiscal Office and the Legislative Council for the Vermont General Assembly in January 2008 about state aid to public libraries. Maybe we could recommend a legislative study, because I do feel like there's a degree to which I don't feel like I have the skills necessary to conduct a working group on the topic of the reorganization. Like, do you all feel like if they had given us that charge instead of the gigantic amorphous blobby giant charge we have, that we would have nailed it in a year and a half? Because I'm not. Karen, save me somehow.
So I think part of what I'm struggling with, and I know I had to step away for a student, so this might have already been discussed, and I know that we've talked about this, not just in this meeting, but in many meetings, the opposition of sort of local control and the idea of the power of many. So they kind of work in opposition, and a lot of people in Vermont, if you ask them what they want local control, but they also want to be able to save a bunch of money and not have to do everything they're doing. So you kind of a little bit can't have both, but one way we could have both is by making sure that we got the people who are the people who will say local control is most important to me on board first. So if there's a big group of librarians in Vermont, and I think they could be public librarians and school librarians asking for, we want more centralized systems because they help us do our jobs better. That's a different conversation than someone coming from Montpelier to say, we are going to make you do this thing. And so part of me feels like perhaps some of the solution is to figure out in our constituencies, what exactly do we want to ask for? And I know that's what we were just talking about, but like very specifically, what would that look like? So if we want more support, what kind of support? With what? Do we want to have everybody be on the same catalog or whatever? Figure out what that thing is. And I know that's really hard. I know like saying it is easy, but like actually getting people to agree on it is really, really hard. But then we have a thing to ask for. I don't know. I feel like my comments there were not very helpful. They made more sense in my head before I started talking. But I think that it can be frustrating to me to think about changing like organizations. So many organizations in the state all have to agree to do something different. We all seem to be asking for a lot of similar things, but when it gets down to the nuts and bolts of like, how are we going to do that? Then that's when we get in the weeds and then everything falls apart. I don't necessarily know how to fix that problem, but I wish there was a solution. There we go. Sorry.
First, Karen, I put my hand up because I have to say, I had just written in a chat message, Karen is so wise. And then you're like, I don't even know if I answered the question. But I mean, it really, the problem with saying legislature do this is then we have non-library community. I mean, they might be in the library community because you might have some librarians or some school librarians in the legislature. I know we have at least one former school librarian in the House of Representatives. And they're in our library community by virtue of being Vermonters, but like, we don't necessarily want to like hand it to them and then they come back and then they tell us, do this crazy thing. And then everybody's upset about it. Like they've been upset about some other large changes that were systemic. So I do like this idea that it is the changes that are most likely to be successful are kind of grassroots up types of changes that are not, you're forced into this squishy mold that doesn't fit and you just lost a leg. Like, you're like, you're walking there on your own, you're rolling there on your own, you're doing it to get there and you're doing it together. Like, I think this is a fast to actually make a recommendation, like, let's go in and we're going to implement county cooperatives or something like us and what army and what funding.
Right. So I guess you articulated it so much better, but I guess my thing is we have to figure out what the roots of our grass are and then get everybody growing in the same direction. And then we know what to ask for, and we can ask for something that's very specific. we need the legislator to do X, Y, and Z because that will help libraries do the things they need to do. And that probably involves funding, but it might just involve like help us make the statutes work the way that we need them to work to do this thing we want to do. But I think step one is making sure that we get everybody to agree to the concept of like, this would be better. The power of many would be better than us just going it alone, which I'm a big fan of.
So I think Kelly and then Denise. I love that they give me a number now. Thank you. Thank you, Microsoft Teams.
I just have to say that's the greatest analogy or metaphor, Karen, about with which way our grass is growing and all of that. I really like that. I just wanted to comment and say that I came from New York and we had the countywide systems and they worked very well. But saying that, we still had a resource sharing committee, which everyone took turns being on different committees, continuing education, resource sharing, things like that. And resource sharing was my favorite, but it was also the hottest topic debate, like people getting hot under the collar, you know, arguing about how agreements would work. And so even in a state where that's kind of a given, you're never going to get people, you know, totally happy with how things go. And there's always going to be, you know, we would have to have some type of a structure for, you know, because our services are constantly changing and evolving. We would need to have some type of structure where people could be heard and, you know, talk about, there was a lot of discussion between our tiny libraries and our big libraries and how are those equally served. And we would have a very similar situation here. So I don't think we should be discouraged by the fact that it's not always going to be like smooth sailing, or that there will be, you know, additional work that has to go into it to make the program work. Because like I said, that was like my favorite, and it was a very popular committee. You could only be on it for so many years and then you had to go off. And so people would often be like, no, it's my turn. It's my turn. And I don't know why, I guess we were a bunch of sadists, but yeah. So even there, like I said, where it was a given, we all kind of were fighting to make sure that we got our equal share and were equally represented. So,
thanks, Kelly. Denise?
I like Karen's idea of trying to figure out what it is we want. I guess my only thought, again, as a newbie who's moved to different states at various times in my life, is I guess it would be valuable for me to have some kind of environmental scan of what the possibilities are, because, you know, I got used to a certain system in Connecticut in which it's the libraries opt in to be cooperative with their lending and their borrowing. Then you go to New Jersey and it was different. And so I'm sure there are other models that I'm just not aware of. And I'd hate to pass up on something that might be really valuable to us because I haven't experienced it. But I don't know how we gather all that information either. That seems somewhat daunting.
There may be a survey of some of it. Like there are these kind of informal surveys that COSLA does, which, you know, the organization that Jeremy was with, you could see what they have done. Meg?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, as you were speaking, Kelly, about, you know, how hard it would be to organize, you know, all of our small libraries, independent, with a history of being independent. Our school districts have done it with Act 60, you know, and yeah, it has not been popular, and they've been tweaking the system, but, you know, the legislation made a pledge to provide equalized educational spending for all Vermont students, especially, you know, ones in underserved communities. And so the concept is not foreign to Vermonters. And I guess I would just, you know, we could, whether it's popular or not, it's the right thing to do, you know. And so I think that we have that at least in Vermont's waters. And, in terms of resource sharing too, what about interlibrary loan? We have a robust ILL system. We do have models of resource sharing. So I think it's leveraging some of the stuff we already do and then just expanding the concept of how we do it.
I just want to share, there are kind of different models even for getting everybody to have library cards everywhere. Like in California, we had our own library cards, but as a California resident, you could get a card anywhere. So you didn't have to unify anything. You didn't have to all have one catalog. You just could be collecting thousands of library cards, which was, I mean, I don't know I never looked into like, what's this mechanism? And I had great books at the library I worked at, and I didn't like go around the Bay Area getting more library cards, but I had friends who totally would just like, anytime they went to a new town, collect one, and they had like trading cards. So it was kind of, and then it's like, okay, well, I want to use Canopy from Oakland because they have these movies, and then San Francisco's got those movies. Like you could totally play it, but it does, and it does complicate things somehow. You have your primary service area, and that's who you're doing business with, but it's basically like you're not making a million cards for the whole state. You're just making the cards of the people. Like somebody from Rutland's not going to drive up to Craftsbury for Susan's card, right? Probably.
It's a pretty cool card. They might.
They might. I want to make sure that something gets into the record for today, which is that I'd like I think it's obvious we need to update the minimum standards. We need to do something with them. And I think it would be great for the working group to recommend that the department begin the rulemaking, begin the process of updating the 1986 minimum standards. And I'd like to do that as the department, not to recommend that we have a working group on it, because I think what we can commit to for the department would be that we kind of get the whole team who have been here on all these meetings, just like you all have. We get our brains together, we kind of do our best shot at it, and then we bring it out to regional meetings of directors and things of that nature and get people's input, which seems a lot more like our natural way of working together and a lot less, it's not as formal in that sense, but then once we've got a good draft, then we go through, like, we have the formal rulemaking process, rather than like all of these people have to meet every week, every month, and it, like the open meetings. I think we would involve the full public per the rulemaking process, but we would also easily commit to like having meetings about it with library directors. Does that sound like an okay thing that we can all agree to?
I make that motion.
Anybody want to, do we have to vote on each of them, Kelly?
No, I was just very excited about that, so.
I second it. Okay.
I have a question about the Board of Libraries. I have too many things here. I had a question and I didn't ask it during the time because we ran out of time. Would we want to recommend that the geographic naming be removed from the Board of Libraries' responsibilities? It seems like that's kind of a question for the Board of Libraries, who are not here right now, but something just to bring up.
Well, I can ask them that we can ask them that. They are a public body, they meet openly, and a subset of us can go to that meeting in July and ask them.
It seems like a lot of the presentation was about that, and it seems like a lot of the time goes into that. And I don't know if the time is needed for other things for the Board of Libraries to be doing that's actually library related. But if so, it seems like that we're the only one doing it that way.
Here.
Oh.
This is Tom. I'm still here.
Excellent. What do you think about that, Tom?
Actually, most of the board members like that the most. That's what they're most interested in. But we could have more meetings. That is one thing I've talked to Kathy about. Because when you get in, you have no idea how long it's going to take for the naming. And then have like 2 a year be for naming, and then 2 or 3 or 4 for doing the other sort of the advisory part of the meeting
Okay.
to be organized. I've been on now for 6 years, 7 years, 6 years, I guess. And it's been somewhat disorganized. I'll be quite honest about it. We're trying to get a handle on it.
We have a handle. We did it, Tom.
Yeah.
We have a handle.
We did it. I agree. I wasn't going to say that, but we actually did it. Yes.
Yeah, I think with the streamlined process, it'll be easier. And I do think some people,
Yeah.
it may be hard to get some people to be on the board. I mean, we actually had, it wasn't like when we were looking at the applications, like there are lots of people saying, I'm here for the geographic naming. And it could be that
Right.
it fits better in some other like ANR, Agency of Natural Resources. It could fit better
Probably.
someplace else. But if the board's not clamoring to have it leave, and if it's kind of the candy that keeps them at the table. But we do, I mean, their primary function is supposed to be to support the state librarian
Support the
in their
library.
work.
Yeah, I agree. We could definitely bring that up as an issue in July. Add that to the agenda now.
Oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock right now. I think we're probably all exhausted. I think as you percolate over the next few days, you'll likely come up with things that you think about or remember. It sometimes takes a minute for all of these ideas to gel for me, and I'm imagining it will for you too. Some of you have been quiet. I haven't gone around and made everybody talk during discussion because we've had a good, robust conversation. So I appreciate everybody who's been an audible participant and everybody who's thinking. You're all doing what you need to do. But please know, I'm going to be out of the office for 2 weeks. I will not be in the country. So if you need something, you're going to talk to Gina Rubin. Gina can help you. Tom and Jeanette are always here too, if anybody needs anything. But if you come up with ideas in the next couple of days, weeks about this topic, I'd recommend that since Susan's our writer, share your ideas direct, just a one-to-one email with Susan. Does that make sense? Because I know she can handle it. And I want to say, I got somebody's report already. Wendy. I believe it was Wendy. Wendy Sharkey got me her report. It was crazy. And Christopher got an extension. In the interest of transparency, Christopher got an extension because he'll be on sabbatical, traveling the world. Can't even go sabbatical. I'm taking a 2-week sabbatical to Sardinia to see my aunt. That doesn't need to make it into the record. But anyway, 2 weeks is all I get for sabbatical.
I've been very quiet because my brain is already in Rome.
My brain is already in Rome trying to figure out how I'm going to get from the airport to the ferry to get to Sardinia, because I decided I wanted to take a boat voyage in the Mediterranean overnight.
I think Christopher's going to give you a ride.
Right.
It feels decadent. What I'm talking about feels decadent because like usually I'm just here in my office with my pocket ninja. Who helps get me through all the meetings. Not needed today because you all are great. You're all a wonderful group and you've all done great work today and you continue to impress me with your dedication and thank you all. And it is 3:02 and I think we should adjourn and get out into the world where it looks beautiful. It looks just lovely out. Have a great weekend. I hope many of you are enjoying a long weekend and thank you so much for your service to the working group.
Safe travels, you two.
If I stay on, I got a 5-minute comment. That's all, Kathy.
Oh, okay. Tom, we should go on a different one.
Okay. We can get out.
Maybe I'll just call you.
Phone, right? Yeah.
I'll give you a call on the phone.
Okay. Very good.